The meditation class tonight. This is our monthly question and answer. Start thinking about a question, but when I'm answering somebody else's question or they're asking a question, make sure that you're listening to that and thinking about it. I was very guilty of this back when I would attend my Sifu's meditation classes that were question and answer, where somebody would be asking a question and I'd be thinking about like, oh, I got to ask a better question than that. What's my question going to be? And then Sifu Brown's talking and I missed like the first half of his answer because I'm in my head thinking about what I'm going to ask when I get the chance, thinking of the perfect question, the most impressive, most just superior question to ask that's going to make me seem so impressive and so deep. And we have a tendency to do this when we're having conversations with each other, right? We instead of actually listening to what the other person is saying, we're in our head thinking about what we're going to say next, or thinking about what we think, like thinking about our own opinions about what they're saying, rather than just like really feeling and getting what they're saying. So sometimes I might not have the perfect words, but I promise you my intention is perfect. So just get the whatever's behind what I'm saying, and it's going to be a wonderful answer. Your questions, if you're watching online, you can also type your questions in and I'll see them. If you have a question on Zoom, just press the button to raise your hand and I'll call on you. If you have a question here, you can just raise your flesh hand, and let's make the question succinct and something to do with our practice on a deeper level. It can be about meditation, but it doesn't have to be only about meditation. It can be about forgiveness. So like the question of the week this week, which is, how do emotions feel in our body, or anything like that. Just don't get caught up in having the perfect question, because that's coming from the ego, and we're trying to just let go of all that in this class. So, questions? Tim.
So when I'm meditating, I find that my posture will slouch, and I'll notice that meditation and my corrective, but it happens pretty often because I don't have great posture. And I just often wonder like how that's affecting my meditation practice, because I guess I'm getting awareness of like, okay, my posture's bad, and so I'm like, okay, that's kind of like coming back to the breath and back to the posture, but it's not coming back to the breath. And I don't know. I guess I'm just wondering how important the posture is, and if I should be focusing so much on it, or just like happen.
I got the whole world of your question because I was listening to you, but also because I've had the exact same experience, and I think many people have in meditation. So on the one hand, it's kind of a question of priority, right? How important is keeping your back straight versus just not moving at all, or like just being totally relaxed and not really caring about the posture. And I'm going to tell you that keeping your posture straight is important. It is not the most important, but it is one of the most important things. And it is actually the most important thing in chronological order, because you want to be able to sit in a good posture before you start in on the meditation and try to keep it there. And just like our mind wandering in meditation, it's very unlikely that we're gonna keep our posture absolutely perfect, especially in the first couple of years of meditation, until you've trained your body to be so strong and just really locked in place. You are going to have a tendency to slouch, and it's the same thing with your mind wandering. Until you've trained it to stay super focused and to not wander to begin with, you're going to recognize it and bring it back. As you said, it's a great thing that you're recognizing that you're losing your posture. And there are only two things that you can do about this. You can just let yourself stay in the kind of slouched position after you recognize it and just bring your mind back to your breath and let it go. Or you can fix your posture. If you're doing a good enough job of recognizing your posture is getting lost very early, then you will notice that it's a very subtle fix that can be done just with an inhale, just a deep inhale into the chest will kind of straighten your posture up, right? And this is what I try to do whenever I can. If I notice a little bit of a slouch, I'll just take a deep breath and my posture will straighten up, which feels different in my body and in the intention of my mind, distinct from I'm taking my mind away from the breath and I'm kind of interrupting the moment by straightening up the posture with this kind of forceful movement. You want it to be natural and easy and as uninterrupted as possible for your breath and your just body awareness. So the other thing to watch out for here is if your body kind of starts to slouch more often because you're using it as an excuse to get out of meditation and to move. And that will happen with aches and with itches. You'll notice that if you have an itch and you scratch it, like you reach up to scratch the itch and before your hand goes back to its position, you've got 10 itches all over your body. Part of it is because of the awareness that you've taken out of the very inside, keeping your awareness on the spine, keeping the awareness on the breath, and it's gone to the surface of your body, and now you feel all these aches and itches and all that stuff. And part of it is because your ego is messing with you. It does not want you to be sitting there meditating. It's going to create itches. It's going to create distractions. So try to just stay in that totally still position. Try to keep your spine straight. And if you recognize it leaving its position early, try to correct it with just an inhale. Be super careful not to allow it to happen repetitively in meditation, not just within one meditation, but over time during different meditations. You're building that habit of losing the posture, and it's almost like your ego is going to create that scenario. It's going to will your posture to go like this. So practice staying there, and it might even mean that you do a shorter meditation sometimes. You really make sure that your posture is totally correct the entire time, and then meditate for longer. Try that, see how it goes. Other question? Yes, ma'am. Tanya. Mm-hmm.
My question is more about that I've heard often that you should allow yourself to be present. You can't stop a feeling or emotion. You should sit with it and let yourself feel the full extent of that. Stop that. Just let yourself feel it.
You've heard that. I've heard that too. I feel like I've said that before, but go ahead. Anger or hatred of something. Even the flip side of that is that just getting lost in happiness and bliss. Yeah. Okay. So the question of the week is, how do our emotions feel in our body? And you're looking for a physical sensation that you have a tendency to tie to an emotion. And this is not a judgment. None of the questions of the week that we do are an exercise in judgment. It is an exercise in awareness. So you are just trying to recognize when you're sad, what does your body feel like physically? Not what are all the other things that you're adding to that, but like what is the actual physical sensation in your body that comes up? And sometimes, often, if you're paying attention, you'll recognize that you might have the physical experience first before you really know what the emotion is, and then you kind of attach it or connect it to, you remember the last time you felt this way, it's because that sad thing happened and you got sad. Or the last time you felt this way, it's because that wonderful thing happened and you were just elated. To be able to recognize the feeling of the physical feeling of an emotion is great. And your question is tangential to that. You're kind of making the leap that I think a lot of people are making, which is if we can recognize the emotion early on, then we can choose to change it. And that's a good thing to be able to do in moderation. If you never allow yourself to feel any emotions that you don't want to feel, it's likely you're heading into the territory of repression, and this is dangerous, and you will probably just be, cramming these things deeper and deeper and deeper until one day you explode, you flip out on somebody. That's one very real danger with this this idea of I'm going to only allow myself to feel positive emotions. You've seen Seinfeld. If you haven't watched Seinfeld, shame on you. But there's a great episode where George, serenity now, he just keeps repeating, serenity now. And whenever something stresses him out, he says, serenity now. And then at the end of the episode, I think he flips out, or somebody flips out because they were saying that, and they weren't actually dealing with the emotions. Our practice is not ignoring or repressing and just saying serenity now. Of course, we practice affirmations and we practice being able to choose our emotional state, but you also want to be able to choose to experience your emotions fully. Now, your question more directly is, if I am allowing myself to experience the emotion, is there a point where it goes too far? And the simple answer to this is yes, because if you are experiencing an emotion that is stopping you from being able to live your life in a functional manner, then you want to be able to let go of it. That is not easy, and for some people it's impossible. There's a lot of work that has to go into training yourself out of that kind of cycle of thinking and emotion, or dealing with the thing that happened so that you don't constantly have the same kind of experience with your emotion. These things that keep coming up are the things that we need to deal with. So that is the line in the sand that I'm going to draw to answer your question. If you are experiencing the emotion, what you're describing is a great exercise where you're sitting and you're feeling it fully, and then you allow it to dissipate in its own time, as long as it's fast enough for you to get on with life. If you're like, yep, it's been 10 years and I'm still sitting in this sadness, this is very clearly something that you should take a different tack on and try to deal with it in a different way. So if you're unable to, the tricky part is what is the right amount of time to feel an emotion for? It's difficult to say, but a good starting point is when everybody starts calling you and wondering why they never see you anymore, or why are you always feeling like this now? You don't want to base your emotional state on what everyone else thinks is proper. That's a whole other bad idea. But it's a good reminder. And if you used to see people all the time and now you just stay at home all the time because you're stuck in this rut, this emotional rut, that's a sign that it might be time to let go of this. And you won't be able to let go of it unless you've allowed yourself to experience it, because either you're going to keep getting dragged back into it, or you'll stuff it away and then it'll show back up at an inopportune time. So by sitting and allowing yourself to feel it to the fullest extent, you are dealing with the emotion and what happened that caused the emotion. You are processing it in a healthy way. This is what you want to be able to do. Unhealthy is when it's lasting so long and it's so deep and you are so attached to it that you're unable to experience other emotions. You're unable to function properly in your life. do your job, to, you know, spend time with the people that you care about, all that. So it might not be as simple as, okay, I'm done feeling sad. If it is, great. When you have recognized I've gotten all that there is to get out of this feeling of sadness, and now all I'm doing is digging deeper into this state because I'm stuck. I've gotten addicted to it, or it's just like I'm feeling unable to get out of it. That's when it's time, seek help if you need it. But if you're able to reason with yourself and just recognize, you know what, I've gotten all that there is to get out of this now. I'm going to choose a different state. Meditation can help that, although very often sitting in meditation is when these states come up, and some people have this experience of, I get stuck in that emotional state that I'm trying to escape from in meditation. So in meditation, we hope to recognize it very quickly and then be able to experience it and let it go, or just be able to let it go as soon as we recognize, you know, this is that thing that I was feeling all day yesterday and I already did it. I don't need to feel it anymore. I can quickly process the thoughts, the cycle of whatever it is that I have already gone through, set it aside, and then move on to the next. But it's a tricky balance. So be aware of it, and never shy away from asking somebody, you know, if it's a professional that you need help for, to get out of this cycle that you're in, or if it's just somebody who has known you for a long time and they can kind of help you to recognize, yep, you have really just gone like this, or you're like this all the time. Are you on drugs, or what's going on? So talk to people who you trust, who can kind of set you straight. Other question. Julia.
So I guess maybe this is happily related or tangentially related to the last question, but can you talk about the difference between non-attachment and detachment a little bit? I don't know. I know that's not a question, but
That is a question. Can I?
Okay,
The answer is yes.
okay, yes.
And
Great. Will you
I'm
please?
going to go ahead and do it because I think that's what you want. Yeah. Now, this is, on the one hand, it's kind of just a semantics difference. Non-attachment, unattachment, detachment. I usually use the word unattachment or non-attachment. And those, some people draw a very clear distinction between. And then there's detachment, which I think some people will make similar in their mind to non-attachment. No, the other one. Anyways, I'm going to talk about the two things, the two kinds of the flavors of not being attached, and they should be distinct. One of them is more forceful, and the other one is more natural. And as you can imagine, the one that fits most with our practice is trying to be more natural and just flow with it. Think of an infant. If you give a baby your finger and it's holding on to it, it's there completely. And you can think of that as attachment. You can think of it as just like being totally in the present, but however it is, it's totally connected to your finger. And then you wave this shiny toy over here and it lets go of your hand and it reaches for this like your finger never existed. And it's so natural for the infant to do this. There's clearly no like psychological issue at play here. The baby is just letting go of this thing and moving directly on to the next. So it's often not until later on in life that we are unable to do this because of the way that we've reinforced attachment. And then we have a tendency to go hard in the opposite direction, where when we hear about this idea of staying unattached and being able to just flow, instead of allowing ourselves to flow from one thing to the next, we're like, let me force this thing out of my consciousness. And that's when meditation gets very stressful, when you're sitting there and you're thinking, don't think, don't think, don't think, or you have a thought and you're like, why am I attached to that thought? What's wrong with me? And you try to force it out. So being unattached is like just flipping on the light switch, and the darkness is just, it disappears because now there's light there. It's not trying to beat the darkness out of the room with a stick. That is not only impossible, but it feels very stressful. It's the opposite kind of feeling from what we want. Detachment is not quite the same as that, like being forceful, but it's like, in my mind at least, the way that I think of detachment as being distinct from what I'm talking about is like I'm so removed from everything that I'm unable to experience things fully. So kind of like to tie in with Tanya's question, am I so detached that I never get an opportunity to experience emotions? Am I so detached that I'm never connecting with people, or I'm never connecting in the moment with life? And we don't want that. We want to be able to fully experience and then not be attached to whatever the experience that we're having is, because that attachment keeps us stuck and it limits us. We're unable to move on in the moment. The ability to let go, like the infant lets go of the finger, and be in the next moment, whatever this present moment is. If we are stuck in the old moments, if we're still attached to whatever that is, we can't experience this fully. There are extremes in both directions. You can just be like a hedonist is one term for this idea of like, I'm just into pleasure in the moment, and like anything else doesn't matter to me at all. Obviously that can lead to its own issues and your inability to be effective and, create things in life. But when we talk about the concept of attachment, non-attachment versus detachment, it's kind of an inability to experience, or like I'm forcing myself to not experience. And that force or just total absence of experience, you're forcing it away, or you never experience it in the first place. These are neither one of them really what we want ideally. We want to be able to experience it, and then when it's run its course, whatever it is, be able to let it go and be in the next moment, totally present. And that's really it. If you're in the present, if you are right here, right now, this is still allowing you to both experience, but also like plan and be effective in life. You can be totally present and planning for the future. That's distinct from I have no ability to control where my mind is at, and it just stays stuck in anxiety for what's going to happen in the future, or it gets stuck in being embarrassed about how we messed things up in the past, or whatever we get attached to there. So the present moment is the key, and we can experience emotions, and we can experience memories, and we can experience planning and all of that. There's this concept of the remembering mind and the experiencing mind, which is very similar to this, what I'm talking about. Sometimes we might get too stuck in the remembering mind and not enough in the experiencing mind, and vice versa. But be able to be present, but be able to smoothly switch between these states so that you're getting the full experience of life. Good luck. Other question? Kaya.
Sarah, I was talking to these little girls about martial arts and like the higher form of it, of like doing as little damage as possible. Well, the younger one actually seemed to really get it. The one that was that 11 years old, she was like, oh, if I'm mad at someone, I want to hurt them as much as possible. And I didn't quite know, I understand it, but I didn't know quite how to explain it to her, you know? Because I mean, yeah, I mean, often people, if they're angry, they're like, I just want to hurt that person because they're trying to hurt me. So I was
So you want
wondering
me
if
to-
you could, if I was wondering if you can, I guess, like how you would answer someone like that, like someone who, like how you would explain it to them, especially a child.
Yeah. And so for those of you who didn't hear it, the question is, I was talking to two younger girls about martial arts and trying to explain this concept of not hurting them if it's possible, you know, controlling them without getting hurt and without hurting them. And one of them just didn't get it and thought like, well, if I'm angry, of course I have a right to hurt this person and that's what I'm going to do. And how would I explain that? I would love to say, Kaya, that this is only a misunderstanding or a concept that children have, but it is very, I think in many people's cases, it's even more solidly part of who they are as an adult. We're used to, part of the issue is when you're a kid and you get used to showing your emotions and that gets you what you want, and then some kids get kind of manipulative with that, but even kids who are just naturally showing their emotions, and that is of course a healthy thing to express your emotions, but it can become very unhealthy if you're expressing it by damaging somebody else, especially when then they damage you back. From one perspective, a way that I have found always, not always, but often works for people is to put it in perspective of like somebody who's really young is attacking you. So this is an 11-year-old girl. You probably shouldn't use the example of what if your little sister was attacking you and trying to hurt you, because she's going to say like, I'd lay her out. I'd knock her out and I'd feel good about it. You got to use the example of you're 11. What if like a 2-year-old child was trying to hurt you and they can barely walk and they can barely, you know, touch you, but they're trying to hurt you as hard as they can. Just because they're trying to hurt you, does that mean that you should hurt them? And she can usually, most people, adults and kids, will get the ridiculousness of this with the mental image of somebody who's super tiny and super young and could not actually hurt you. And so then I hope most of you who are hearing this for the first time understand that if a small child is attacking you, and like literally all you need to do is put your hand on their forehead and they're like trying to hit you as hard as they can, but they can't touch you. That's all you need to do. This kid's trying to hurt you. You don't need to drop kick them, you know, into traffic. You can just, you know, hold on to them or just move out of the way or whatever it is. It's not then so much of a leap to go from that to this is somebody who is the same age and the same size as you. Maybe they're even bigger and stronger than you, but you have such a higher skill level that then you don't need to hurt them. And in fact, it's your responsibility, if you have that higher skill level, to not hurt that person, because they are essentially in that situation the same as that 3-year-old kid who is trying to attack you. As ridiculous as it would be to hurt that little child, it's just as ridiculous to hurt this person who, even though they might really want to hurt you, they don't have the ability to do that if you're using the martial arts skills that you possess. Don't get ahead of yourself and think that, hey, I've been doing martial arts for a long time. I mean, I'm a white sash now, so I could probably kill anybody. And think that you're so good that you can handle anybody. There's still a very good likelihood that somebody that's strong-ish and your size-ish attacks you. You might need to just poke them in the eyes and run away. But at a certain point, and with a certain dynamic, this person might be your size and very strong, but they're inebriated, or they're, so out of it, they can't actually hurt you. There are obviously situations where you can take this person under control and not have to hurt them. And there is a kind of ethical, moral dilemma and argument here for why you should do that. And you might not necessarily believe that, but I'll tell you, if you're going to live in society and you go around destroying people unnecessarily, you're eventually going to get in trouble for that. You'll probably go into jail and you'll deserve it. So whether you think it's the right thing to do or you just think it's the lawful thing to do, this is an important thing. And if you can explain this to an 11-year-old girl, I think that would be wonderful. 11-year-old girl, not so bad. Once they get to like 13, teenage girl, and some of you have experienced this, some of you were teenage girls and you remember this, there's nothing more dangerous and stubborn than really any 13-year-old, but usually it takes boys a little bit longer to get stubborn. In any case, I digress. That kind of mental image, I think, is really helpful for people. But you can also get at it from the other angle, which is like, Tanya's my partner. This stuff just looks really cool. Let me throw my mask on since I'm about to throw you. Of course, like if somebody tries to grab your wrist like this, you can just kick them and that's it. But that doesn't look as, oh, they can't see that. So, but it doesn't look as cool as going like, oh, and bringing them around. Okay, well, that was a little bit easier than I thought it was going to be. Thank you. It just looks cooler. It's harder to do. And so this is one of the reasons that we practice from the beginning doing these techniques that are much nicer to our partners. We practice from the very beginning poking people on the eye, and we practice being able to throw them and control them without having to seriously hurt them. Because the first one is the one that you'll actually be able to pull off tonight if you get attacked. But the second one is like over years of practice, you'll be able to do this in a real life situation and not have to hurt the other person. I'll finish with the concept of karma, which, whether you believe it or not, is at least a fun and interesting way of thinking about life. Ueshiba Sensei used to say that, and he's the founder of Aikido, he would say, if somebody attacks you and you add your own strength to it, whether it's you block and strike them or you grab them and you use lots of your own power to throw them on the ground, then you're building up bad energy or bad karma. Versus if they attack you and all you do is steer their energy, then you're not building up any bad karma, right? They punched you as hard as they could, but you moved out of the way and steered them to the ground, and they just punched themselves into the ground. You didn't really do it. And the idea of being able to not add any of yourself, because that's ego. Somebody's attacking you and you go, how dare you, I'm going to teach you a lesson. And that's when you end up hurting somebody unnecessarily, or just as likely you end up getting yourself hurt unnecessarily because you're adding too much to this. So try to just steer and do these very fluid techniques, or control your partner with as little effort and as little pain as possible. Then when they're done, then they are more likely to leave you alone than if you hit them really hard or you threw them really hard. If they just made an idiot of themselves by punching themselves into the ground and they tripped, they're just gonna slink away feeling silly about it. You can also sleep well that night knowing that you didn't add anything extra. All you did was play with the energy and steer it to the ground. We want to be able to do this in conversations so that they don't turn into arguments, so they don't turn into this kind of feeling. It's just I'm playing with the energy of the conversation. We want to do the same thing when we're meditating. Rather than the thought comes in and we fight against it and we resist it, we just invite it in and then let it go immediately. Same thing with an emotion. We invite it in, we experience it, and then we can just let it go. So this is the kind of feel that we're trying to get in the physical practice, whether it's a child attacking us or a full-grown adult. It's the same thing we're trying to get in our internal practice as well. So that's what we're going to do right now. Sit comfortably.